Hi, Phil Aston here from Now Spinning Magazine with another album overview and stories going back into my youth. And it's another Black Sabbath story album. And this time it's Never Say Die. I think I've been asked to cover this album more than any other. And this has been quite an adventure to put this together. Basically, I'm going to split this video into a couple of sections, okay? And some of the things I'm going to say, some of you may find very disturbing, especially those of you who are hardcore Sabbath fans. So if you need to be sitting down, or you need to make sure you've got a drink with you, or whatever it is you need, just to keep yourself kind of nice and, level, then please get that while I'm doing the kind of section when I'm showing you different bits and pieces, okay? But hopefully you'll enjoy what I'm going to say and still want to subscribe if you have already. And if you haven't, please do. Right, Never Say Die by Black Sabbath. The first thing I'm going to do is show you the various bits and pieces I have that relate to this album. And then afterwards, I'm going to tell you my journey towards how I felt to how I feel. Okay, let's have a look, first of all, at Never Say Die. So this is the original Never Say Die single from 1978, and the B-side was She's Gone from Technical Ecstasy. That was the first thing that I had. Some of you thinking, what's this on the side? Well, this is a ticket for a rock club called Sabbath Rock from the Rio Grande in Birmingham, where I first heard Never Say Die. The next thing that I got was the next single, which I wrote Black Sabbath on, and it was Hard Road, which came on purple vinyl. Remember, purple is still huge at this time, so I thought that was peculiar. And the B-side was Symptom of the Universe. I then went to see the band, and if I can find everything, I went to see them in the Birmingham Odeon, and the tickets were £2.80 for the front stalls. And this is the programme and the badge. This is the actual tour badge. It was the 10th anniversary of the band, so World Tour 1978. And this is the programme, which I'll show you. It's not autographed or anything, but it's the, I think it was less than £1. I'm sure it was. So Never Say Die was the new album. Lots of pictures of the band playing live. Picture of Van Halen. Little did they know what was coming. And then we've got the story of the band, the sheer determination to keep going. Pictures of Bill Ward. Again, section on Bill. His background to what he feels about being in the band. Double page spread of the band live. Great pictures. Tony Iommi talking about how well they get on. And Geezer Butler talking about the fact they've been together 10 years. Pictures of Geezer and Ozzy. And Ozzy Osbourne here saying that he'd recently left the band because everyone knew about that at this stage, but he'd come back, and he's saying here that he realised that leaving was a mistake and Sabbath was the only band for him. And then the last picture is of Ozzy literally in full flight, and then Van Halen at the back as well, talking about their arrival onto the music scene. And so that was the tour programme. The next thing I want to show you is the CD version from, 2004, I think this was. This was the edition which showed the programme, which I've just showed you, and the picture of Ozzy there taking off, literally levitating, artwork from the inner sleeve of the original album, and only from Hugh Gilmore just a few paragraphs about the story of the album, and then the lyrics from that period. The next one was the 16-page booklet, and this is when Bill Ward was involved, and this is from 2009, so this is the digipack. So it is different, which is why I keep them all. So this was a different essay, and also Bill Ward is involved with this. There's more memorabilia. I remember buying that copy of Sounds. There's my purple single. And the picture sleeves from different territories. The inner sleeve again. Some more picture sleeves. Good essay from Jerry Ewing. And then the full credits are on the back. And then the last one I want to show you for this before I start telling you my story is the vinyl version, which is from 2023. This is the splatter vinyl version, and the reason why I bought this, if I can extract it, was not so much because of the splatter itself, was because it came with a copy of the 10-Year War booklet, which was first included in the giant 10-Year War box set, which had all the albums in splatter vinyl. So they must have had some left over. And this is a great piece of memorabilia. So real comic illustrations from the time. If you're from the 70s, we saw lots of things like this. And lots of memorabilia, lots of cuttings, basically lots of press cuttings saying that Sabbath will never make it, and all the rest of it. And it's basically showing that although the critics didn't like the band, the fans did. The fans loved the band, and this is a lovely thing to have, I feel. And this, as I say, comes with the new version, the most recent version of Never Say Die, which is the splatter version. And I don't think this was Record Store Day 1. You let me know if I'm wrong there, but it's a limited edition, and that's the vinyl version that I have. So let's hear what I thought about this album and why I don't have the original on vinyl from 1978. So that was Never Say Die, various bits of memorabilia, CDs, the more recent vinyl album. So where and why haven't I got the original vinyl pressing when I have everything else by Black Sabbath, many of which I bought at the time of release? What happened back in 1978 that meant I left Never Say Die on the shelf for years? Okay, it's 1978. It is 1978. Let's go. I'm there. Okay. 1978. I'm in a pub, a rock pub in Birmingham called Bogart's. I used to go there most nights, actually. I'm literally, how old am I? I'm 19 years of age. So actually, I've only been drinking a year, obviously. And I used to get there for about 7:30. And a couple of my friends who used to come there quite often were late that particular time, and then they come together and they said, "Phil, did you see Top of the Pops?" And I went, "No, why?" And they said, "Black Sabbath were on Top of the Pops." And I thought, Sabbath were on Top of the Pops? Because back then you didn't have the kind of internet or something telling you if something, a band was going to bring out something new. It was just a surprise when anything happened. And they said, "Black Sabbath on doing this song called Never Say Die." And I said, "What was it like?" And both my friends said, "Well, it was all right. I don't think you've really missed anything." And I thought, no, they're having me on. It's Black Sabbath. It must have been fantastic. They haven't been on Top of the Pops since Paranoid. So what's it like? And it got into the charts. So then I went to my Sunday rock club, which was at the Rio Grande, called Sabbath Rock. I'm from Birmingham, by the way. Sabbath were everything. And they played it. And I bought it. And I kind of thought, well, the reason I bought it is because, again, money. I couldn't afford to buy everything that appeared. 1978. I'm going to leave Van Halen aside for a moment. But, Long Live Rock and Roll by Rainbow was out. All Night Long by Sammy Hagar. Pieces of Eight by Styx. There were just so many. Power Age by AC/DC. I'm sure they'll just keep flooding into my mind now. But I bought this single, Never Say Die. And when I heard it again, got it home, I thought, there's something about the guitars. I mean, I was so used to Master Reality, Volume 4, even the previous album, which I've done a massive 2 big videos on Technical Ecstasy. It's one of my favourite Sabbath albums. I saw it as progressing, featuring some of Tony Iommi's best guitar playing, a great production. Everything always going forward, some Sabotage, the guitar sound, everything. That here, the guitar sounded a bit more thin, and the kind of guitar solo was kind of more rock and roll, a bit like it taken Rock and Roll Doctor a bit further in. But I'd bought the single because I thought there's bound to be another track off the album on the B-side. The B-side was She's Gone from Technical Ecstasy. Okay, fair enough. Well, I'm not going to buy the album yet. I'm going to see if there's another another single will appear. And it did. And so the single appeared that was Hard Road. Now, I'm going to be totally honest. Anything that goes dunk, da dunk, da dunk, da dunk to me was Status Quo. And I love Status Quo. To me, that was their trademark sound, that kind of boogie shuffle. It's the reason why in my recent UFO ranking video, I said that I've always had I've not loved Dr. Doctor as much as some people, because I see it as kind of like they'd taken away something that Status Quo were doing very well. Hard Road had that, and to be honest, it's the kind of rhythm that you wouldn't expect Sabbath to do. Well, not really since Evil Woman, perhaps, off the first album, but even then that was more sinister. But this was kind of really jolly. And so again, was the B-side going to be something else from the Never Say Die album to see whether this is something I was going to get? It wasn't. It was Symptom of the Universe from Sabotage, which made me a bit suspicious. So I thought, okay, well, the gig's coming up soon, so I'll wait until that happens before I make my decision. The week before, I go to see Black Sabbath for the 10th anniversary gig at the Birmingham Odeon. My friend lends me the first Van Halen album, because Van Halen, what's that? Is it a folk duo? What is it? So I've heard the first Van Halen album, and that's a separate video which you can find, and it changed my life. So now, not only am I excited that I'm going to see Black Sabbath, but Van Halen are on. So this is going to be a gig and a half, isn't it? So I go to the gig thinking, well, I'll see Van Halen will probably do a few songs, and then Black Sabbath will probably promote this album the most, and I'll hear more tracks. They didn't do that. But anyway, before that happened, Van Halen came on and played literally the whole of their debut album, bar one or two tracks, Ice Cream Man, I think, and blew the place apart. I mean, normally at the Birmingham Odeon, no matter who was the support act, a good percentage of the audience would be in the bar. It's just traditional. But in this case, it wasn't like that. Everyone was there to watch Van Halen. Van Halen played a blinder. We weren't used to, in the UK, seeing vocalists leap up and do the splits and guitarists play like that and run around the stage. Sabbath were quite a static band. Iommi liked to be centre stage. It was pretty unusual, really. And he did his long solo piece, which again, next to Eruption, just felt a little bit kind of old. Ozzy was a little bit kind of... The whole band had been indulging in life and success, and they were caught on the hop, really. I think that's the kindest way of putting it. Some other people say they were blown off stage, but they weren't at the height of their powers. I think that's the fairest thing to say. In the programme, of course, many of us knew in Birmingham that Ozzy had already left. I almost said the wrong band then. He'd left Black Sabbath, and they tried out another singer for two of the songs that appeared on Never Say Die, but Ozzy came back. He couldn't get any traction or any backing to be a solo singer. And he says in the programme, I'm so pleased to be back with Black Sabbath. There's only one band for me, and it's Sabbath. So all the PR was saying this was going to be fantastic. And I also bought the badge. I suppose I should put the badge on, really, for authenticity. Here's my Black Sabbath 1978 World Tour badge on. Then, after all of this, all the dust had settled, I went round to a friend's house and meet him on the way into town to go to the pub, and he was playing Never Say Die, and he was playing... by the time I got round to his house, there were two tracks left to hear. One was Breakout, and one was Swinging the Chains. Now, Breakout was the one with the brass section on it, and then afterwards Bill Ward sang. So those were the next two tracks that I heard from Never Say Die. And from that point on, I just thought, I don't know what has happened to Black Sabbath. What has happened to this band that did Into the Void, and again, this is their last track, side 2. So I thought, well, whatever, I'd only got round to my friend's house, he's playing the last two tracks because he played everything else. And the last track usually on a Black Sabbath album was a bit of a belter, really, a bit of a kind of real top-notch track, say Into the Void, Under the Sun, Dirty Women. And this was like, it was a surprise. And so, I'm afraid, I walked away from buying Never Say Die. So, are you still with me? But I did. And what I'm about to tell you next is probably even more shocking, is that I then went from 1978 through to the 80s, and yes, I rejoined the Sabbath bus, if you like, when Dio joined. I went to see them in the Heaven and Hell tour, which is again is a separate video, and I met the band. All of them signed my program, and I just carried on. And all the way through the 80s, I followed Black Sabbath from Seventh Star, obviously the Dio period, the Tony Martin period. As again, I've just done extensive interview with Tony and reviewed that box set. I just stayed with Sabbath completely, apart from one album, this one. So I hadn't heard it at the time of release all the way through. All the way through the 1980s, I never heard this album. I never had any intention of being bothered to hear anything else from it. It wasn't played anywhere. It wasn't played in the rock pubs or disco. No one played it. No one talked about it. So now I know that lots of people go, oh, it's their entry point. It's one of my favourite albums. I don't understand why it doesn't get such great press. Nobody talked about it in my circle of the world. They just didn't. During this period, of course, Ozzy became huge. I saw Ozzy. I saw him on the first Blizzards of Oz tour. Fantastic with Randy Rhoads. Brilliant gig. But again, I never had any interest in going back here. Then, in the early 2000s, I was buying all of the Black Sabbath albums on CD. And I did realise that there was one I hadn't got. And I thought, well, for completion, I really should get Never Say Die. So I bought it on the remastered CD, and I played it once. And my prejudices were just the same. I couldn't remember what I'd played. Nothing stuck in. I remembered the singles I knew, and that was that. When was the next one? Because this is important. The next one was 2009. Because that was the next time I heard it, really. All the Sabbath stuff got remastered and came out with these little digipacks and everything. And so I thought, well, I can't really not get it. So I got it. And I played it again. Still nothing. Again. You're getting worried now, aren't you? Thinking, why am I doing this video? Or why have I got this? Well, something happened. What happened was I started something called Now Spinning Magazine. And I started to obviously talk about music that I love and bands that I love, and started to talk about my stories of why I love things or whatever. And I covered a lot of Black Sabbath. Obviously I've gone through each deluxe box set. And I've done separate videos on the first Black Sabbath album, just talking about what that album meant for me when I was at school, and I haven't done Sabbath Bloody Sabbath yet, but that's on the cards. But I realised as I've done each of these Sabbath videos, just how much the band means to me, how much Black Sabbath and each component, each member of that band, each song, each album, regardless of the lineup, because, as I've always said, and this is a trigger now for me, that every Black Sabbath, you can trust every Black Sabbath album. And I bought that book called Hand of Doom, where the author missed out Technical Ecstasy and he missed out Never Say Die. And I basically decided I couldn't read that book because how could you diss Technical Ecstasy when it's such a brilliant album? And I thought, well, Never Say Die is different because I don't get it. But then I started to realise, as I've immersed myself in all this Sabbath stuff from every lineup, maybe I need to really sit down and face this album and find out what it is that, for whatever reason, I didn't get for decades. So I saw that this was coming out, and it's splatter vinyl version, and it came with, as you saw when I gave the run through, it came with a 10-year war booklet. So I thought, well, I've always wanted that. I couldn't afford the big box, so I thought, let's go for it. So I put it on and listened to it. I don't know, maybe it's some kind of wizardry, maybe it's some kind of divine finger came out of the sky, or maybe it's aliens, I don't know. But was this the same record? Was this the same album that for years I just dismissed as being, well, I know they made it, but because all of a sudden everything started to drop. Now, if you expect me to say, I can't believe it, it's the best thing I've ever done, that isn't going to happen. But what I do understand now is what I couldn't hear or even see at the time. And I do firmly believe that, because I know a couple of people have already said it's their favourite album because it's the first Sabbath album they ever heard. I think the entry point for any band as a magic point for any music fan, even if you know that albums before or afterwards are seen as more like the classics, your entry point is a magical time to any form of music or band. Never Say Die. It's commercial, isn't it? That's the bit I missed. It has wonderful harmonies and melodies in it. Ozzy is, to this day, is brilliant at pulling out great melodies out of the air. Johnny Blade. I know why I found this difficult. I was so used to everything being driven by hard, crunchy Iommi riffs. This starts with literally very to the front synths from Don Airey. There's kind of, the guitars are lighter. That broad, deep crunch of riffs is not the same. The production is lighter. There's more emphasis on the vocals, on the melody lines than there probably is in any other Sabbath album. If you imagine it with bigger guitars, it would sound very different. But the Ozzy melody on Johnny Blade is fantastic. And those kind of Don Airey synth runs towards the end, it's very different. It didn't feel like a progression like Technical Ecstasy did at the time. I just didn't like the sound of it. But now, hearing it properly, giving it a chance, I can hear that now. It's just has this kind of pop sensibilities in and amongst it. The next track, Genius Eyes, I really do like. The great bass drum groove, the wah-wah guitar, and again, Ozzy sounds fantastic on it. He sings really, really well. Wonderful melody, very light. It feels commercial. When I say the word light, it's because the whole album has got this very a feel that's more focused around the vocals and the harmonies, I think, than any other Sabbath album that there is. And then Hard Road, the Status Quo Shuffle. What I missed on this, really, and again it fits in with everything I've just said, is as we head towards the fade, and the fade is some way off when we start to head towards it, is all those backing vocals and the playing of the lead vocal, ad-libbing over the backing vocals, the harmonies, the kind of feel that Ozzy was always a great Beatles fan. That kind of backing vocals and vocal harmonies is unique probably to this album in the way it's put together. You didn't get that on really any other Black Sabbath album. This is as far removed from Paranoid, the album, as you could probably get. But it's beautiful, isn't it? The way that the harmonies are put together and the way it's done, I can imagine them thinking, whoa, this is different, but sounds good, might make a good single. Not to a 19-year-old didn't, but to me now I'm a bit kind of, just beyond my 20s, it sounds really good. So we flip it over and we get to Shockwaves, which is... see, this is this was one of those songs I heard the last two and just decided that was enough. But Shockwave, what a great riff. The production again is light. It's not Sabbathy as what I might have expected, but the Ozzy melodies are excellent. The solo is fantastic, and wonderful instrumental section as well, isn't it? It's just great. Then we have Air Dance, which is a great riff, acoustic section, piano, lovely Aussie vocal, and then it goes into this jazz section, wah-wah solo. Now, I should have, at the time, had my ears more open to realise that bringing in these kind of jazz piano elements and experimentation was, in a way, a natural place for Sabbath to go after Technical Ecstasy. But I just didn't get it. Maybe I'd been the Van Halen thing pouring out into the gaps of my life at this moment. I just wanted Sabbath to be up there, being what they were doing. I was seeing Sabbath as kind of a fading star, and the star relit when they did Heaven and Hell. But listening to this now, I understand that there was a lot of things going on. Yeah, the band behind the scenes were finding this really difficult. So I think they were pulling themselves apart. But they weren't exactly, happily married couple on Technical Ecstasy, were they? Were different places. So it was, all the ingredients were there. And Over to You, great riff, very commercial. It's got real pop sensibilities. And I think that's the other thing, to really listen to this album afresh, which is what I've done. And I've been playing it several times to get into the kind of zone for doing this video. It's just how wonderful the vocal melodies are. And it's another flavour in the Black Sabbath story, which I didn't see at the time for years, as I said. But now, playing it again, it is what sticks out the most is the vocal harmonies, the melody lines, and the experimentation, and a different stage in Black Sabbath's career. So what do I think of Breakout and Swinging the Chain? Those two tracks that all the way back to 1978 basically told me I'm not going near this album. There's nothing on here for me. They are probably still the most controversial tracks, I guess, to my ears. Maybe not to yours, but they are to mine. But because I've mentioned, the jazz element of Air Dance, the vocal harmonies of Hard Road, that Breakout with the kind of sludgy riff and the brass sections fits in. It fits in here better than anywhere else. And Swinging the Chain, Bill sings with good gravel in his voice, with good angst, and it works. And it is a very, very different sounding Black Sabbath album. And I now see why people put this in the same camp as Technical Ecstasy, because both of these albums, are experimental. They are both progressive. And if you look at Black Sabbath through their career, when I use the word progressive, it's always been there. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was a very progressive rock album. The amount of different textures and song styles and songwriting arrangements was there for all to see. So it was already there. And every Sabbath album was very different to the other. We kind of tend to think now Black Sabbath being just a metal band. But when you dissect or look at each album individually, they are their own personality. And Never Say Die certainly has its own personality. So I am so happy that now it has joined the others as being part of my Sabbath journey. To such a degree that I'm now going to do a Black Sabbath ranking video of all the Sabbath albums I own. Not now, but that is on the cards. I'm not going to do an Aussie lineup or whatever lineup, because just like I've done with anything else, to me, it's Black Sabbath. And so it's my journey through Black Sabbath. But hope you liked that. And if there's any elements where some of you out there are thinking, God, is he finished yet? That was quite traumatic for you, then let me know in the comments, and I'm very sorry. But hopefully you now realise that I've got there after all these years. It's never too late. Never say die. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your support and all your kind comments about this YouTube channel and the website and joining the Facebook group. And all of you reach out to me in all the different ways that you can. Please subscribe. Check out the website at nowspinning.co.uk. Check out the podcasts as well. They're on Apple, Amazon and Spotify and whatever social media platform there is out there. So are Now Spinning Magazine. Please subscribe if you can. And if you want to become a Patron YouTube member, check out the links below. But thank you. And remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Some medicine takes a bit longer to take effect. Okay, so stay safe, everyone. And I shall see you all very, very soon.